Bev, are you excited about Thanksgiving?
I love Thanksgiving.
What do you love about it?
Well, my mom is an amazing cook, and she makes a lot of desserts and pies and casseroles. And my favorite pie is pecan pie.
You are not Midwestern, but that's very Midwestern of you to say that you're looking forward to casseroles. My favorite pie is pecan pie too.
Yeah.
You feel very confident in how you pronounce pecan pie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how everyone around me pronounces
I sometimes question my own pronunciation. So you're from Western North Carolina. I'm from Central North Carolina. You suggested that we use this tool together today that can establish where we're from.
Right.
You said this is something that I should have seen from last year. It's from 2013.
I said in the last 10 years. The last 10 years.
It's not even in the last 10 years.
Oh God, 2013 is 12 years ago. Okay,
in any case.
Fine. Okay, so there was this quiz that came out. It asks your pronunciation of these words, and based on like which words you use or your pronunciation of the words, it can pinpoint where you live. And pecan is a Western North Carolina pronunciation. It's like an Appalachian pronunciation of pecan, which I think is more Eastern North Carolina. But for each word, it has like a map of where those pronunciations live.
So I think we should do this quiz together.
Okay. Let me open it though. Okay. All right. How would you address a group of 2 or more people? Y'all.
I would love to pretend I would say y'all, but I think you is what I would say. All right. What do you call the night before Halloween?
Nothing.
Thursday. I have no word for this.
What do you call the rubber-soled shoes worn in gym class or for athletic events?
Tennis shoes.
Tennis shoes, yeah.
What do you call something that is across both streets from you at an intersection or diagonally across from you in general?
Catty corner. Yeah. What do you call the sale of unwanted items on your porch, in your yard, etc.?
Yard sale?
Yep.
What do you call a traffic jam caused by drivers slowing down to look at an accident or other diversion on the side of the road?
Rubbernecking.
How do you pronounce the second syllable of pajamas? Pajamas? Pajamas.
Pajamas.
What do you call a large motor vehicle used to carry freight?
18-wheeler?
Me too. What do you call a drive-through liquor store? Super fun.
They don't have those where he lives. What do you call a sweetened carbonated beverage?
Soda.
We sometimes call it a Coke. Like everything's kind of I don't know.
It's one of the options.
Yeah. How do you pronounce crayon?
Crayon.
You say one syllable?
It must take you so long to get through the day.
What do you call it when rain falls while the sun is shining?
I do have a word for that, but I'm blanking.
Apparently one of the options is the wolf is giving birth.
No way.
Yes.
Wow.
The devil is beating his wife.
What are the other options?
Fox's wedding, pineapple rain, liquid sun, sun shower. What do you call a large wild cat native to the Americas?
Bobcat. Mountain lion.
Excuse me, Jane here, producing this, cutting this tape. I just wanted to come in and make a few corrections. I know that these two are doctors, so they're supposed to know what they're talking about, but real quickly, it's you guys, Devil's Night, tennies are for kids, sneakers are for adults, cattywampus, garage sale, the Oh My God Squad, pajamas, otherwise you wouldn't be able to say jammies, semi, beer depot, pop, and puma, as you were.
It didn't actually have pecan, but...
I still think it was valuable.
Yes. Now we know where we're from. And even if we talk differently, we can still communicate with people, which is what today's episode is all about.
It is. And getting ready for the holidays.
Yeah.
So the premise of the podcast has been that we want people to feel prepared when they encounter relatives, loved ones who may have opinions that are different from theirs at something like a family gathering, like a Thanksgiving meal. So we started doing some research to figure out who could help us.
So Tanya Israel is a professor of counseling psychology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And she's written a couple of books about these topics. Beyond Your Bubble, How to Connect Across the Political Divide, and Facing the Fracture, How to Navigate the Challenges of Living in a Divided Nation. So she's an expert in this area, and she gives us some really great advice today about how to have more peaceful conversations with people that we know and love about divisive topics.
Dr. Tanya Israel, welcome to Outlawed.
Hi, I'm Tanya. Feel free to call me Tanya or Dr. Israel. Do you all go by doctor on the podcast or do you go by first
First
names?
names.
Okay, then please call me Tanya. The thing is, we can question people's awareness of their own motivations as much as we want. But what I know is that if we treat other people as if they are the monsters who we imagine them to be, we will never get anywhere with them. And so, if we don't really understand how people see their own motivations, whether we are trying to advocate for a perspective, whether we're trying to, connect with another human being and be seen, whether we're trying to find common ground, whatever it is, we're just not going to be effective unless we try to approach people from a framework that they can see themselves. When I was 16, I took a psychology class in high school and I said, oh, that's what I want to do. And unlike most people, I just went that career path and stayed with it my whole life. I didn't become a practicing psychologist. I became an academic counseling psychologist. So I have training in how to provide services, how to do therapy. But before I went to grad school for that, my first job out of college was working in a clinic that provided abortions in a doctor's office. And so that is sort of what got me into the area of women's reproductive health. I had also been a peer health educator in college, so I had done education around contraception and sexually transmitted infections and HIV. So I had that background, but what happened when I was working in this clinic is that there would be protesters outside, and the women who were coming for services would have to navigate through these, really, aggressive sounding. They weren't physically aggressive, but aggressive sounding people. And what I knew is that these women were having, just some of the hardest moments of their lives coming in. Like that was a stressful day. And it was just making it worse that they had to, run this gauntlet. So it really got me thinking a lot about these other people, and at first being really angry at them and frustrated that they were making it so much harder for these people who I was trying to help. And eventually I got tired of being angry, and that's when I started looking for other options about how to think about and interact with them. So I reached out to the head of the local pro-life crisis pregnancy center, and I said, hey, do you want to get together and talk? And so she said, sure, come, I'll give you a tour of our facility. And I said, fine. And so I went over and did that. And then we talked about this idea, and she was game, and I was like, well, great. I mean, I can reach out. I was part of the pro-choice coalition in town. I said, I can reach out to my people, but I have no credibility with, pro-life people. And she said, I can reach out to them. We both reached out to our communities, and we started meeting at the public library. And we met on a regular basis every month at the public library and had conversations with each other. And it was a really transformational experience for me. It didn't change anything about how I felt about abortion, but it changed so much about how I felt about the people who disagreed with me on it.
What was the first meeting like?
Well, I am a big fan of ground rules or communication guidelines. So we set some guidelines that we could all agree to in terms of listening to each other, in terms of being respectful of each other, and everybody who was there was on board. They really wanted to do something different. And so people started sharing, like what brought them there. And then, as the meetings went on, people shared more about sort of how they came to their views on abortion. And that was so interesting to me because I had been a women's studies major. Like when I was, I don't know, probably a teenager, I read a book from my parents' bookshelf called Mandatory Motherhood. And so I had these very, uh, you know, these academically informed ideas about, about a pro-choice perspective that for me then, saying that you were pro-life and a feminist, which some people were, doing, I was like, well, no, that's inconceivable. It's just you can't think about things that way. It's illogical. And so what I realized I was doing was I was evaluating their conclusions through the framework of my own experiences and values. And when I actually heard them start at their beginning point and lay out their path to how they've come to think about things, I was like, oh, well, that makes complete sense. It humbled me considerably, realizing how ignorant I was of different paths that people might take to their views, and realizing how, a little bit elitist I was about judging their conclusions without having really any idea about how they got there. There's this really fascinating cognitive bias called motive attribution asymmetry. And with motive attribution asymmetry, we all see our own motivations as benevolent. We see that we are motivated by love and caring, and we think that people on the other side are driven by hatred. And we all see things this way. A lot of the earliest work on this was done in the Middle East, where, they asked Israeli Jews and Palestinians, about motivations, and both sides said, oh, our side is motivated by love, and they want to kill us. And we see the same thing playing out in all kinds of political divisions, including the abortion debate. That abortion providers see themselves as providing such an important service to, pregnant people who are seeking this. And people who are pro-life activists see themselves as abolitionists who are trying to prevent a genocide. It's like, wow, everybody really sees themselves in this light of trying to be most helpful in a challenging situation. I've started advocating for what if we actually had deeper conversations with people who we consider to be on our own side. Often our conversations don't go beyond something like, oh my gosh, did you read that op-ed? I know, that was terrible. Yeah, I'm so upset. Like that's the level of conversation we're having. And I mean, that's not even interesting. And it certainly doesn't help us to deepen our understanding of our own views or anybody else's. So I actually had a conversation with some pro-choice friends about abortion recently. And I was like, so how did everybody get to their views that they are? And really what I found is we certainly did not all see things the same way. There was a much wider range of sort of our pro-choiceness. And I was like, oh, wow, like I'm completely aligned with some of these people, and I really don't see things the same way as others. And I think that's useful to us. I think it's useful to recognize some diversity of thought on our own side. And it also does help to prepare us to have conversations with other people because it feels like a safer environment, perhaps, although it also is a little bit fraught when we recognize that we have disagreements with people who are on our own side. But it helps us practice curiosity and practice listening and reflecting back what we hear in a situation that might feel less controversial than having that conversation with somebody who identifies as being in a different political position than we are.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, about listening curiously and how you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing is you really have to go in with the intention that you want to know where they're coming from. When I ask people, like, why is it that you're interested in having a conversation with somebody who you disagree with? There are four answers to that question that I hear most often. Some people say, there's someone in my life who I want to maintain a relationship with, and we're having trouble doing that. Some people say, that they want to persuade or convince someone. Other people are looking for common ground or trying to heal the divide. And then they're the people who say, I simply cannot fathom how people can think or act or vote as they do. And they're trying to gain some insight. So the best thing that we can do is open it up to have somebody share with us where they're coming from. And so we have to say, I really want to hear, and I'm going to try to listen to try to understand you, and not to convince you and jump down your throat. And then you actually have to do it. So the way that you do that is when somebody's speaking, rather than in your head thinking of all of the arguments that you're going to make to contrast with them and to win the argument, instead, you're going to think, what are they really saying? And if I were going to summarize that and share it back, what might I say? It's like you're going to have a pop quiz. So you've got to prepare for it by really paying attention. And then when they're done speaking, that's what you do. You summarize back what you heard. And then they're like, oh, exactly. Then they feel seen and understood. And sometimes you can even say, oh yeah, can you tell me more? And draw them out some more and hear more about. I think the best thing to ask people about are the meanings and experiences and values. So it's like, okay, when you say you're pro-life, what does that mean to you? And what kinds of values do you have that connects to? And what experiences have you had that led you to that view? That's a much better conversation than saying, where did you read that? Or what's the source of your statistics? That's not going to help us to achieve our goals. So if you just keep doing that and trying to understand them, then that's going to help to maintain the relationship. It's going to help you heal or find common ground. It's going to help you to understand. And it's actually also going to help you to persuade someone, because we can never persuade people if they don't trust us, if they don't see us as somebody who has something valuable to offer them. And they're never going to do that if we're coming on the attack.
I think that's really, really helpful. So if we're in conversation with someone, often people within the pro-life movement are sharing misinformation or sharing kind of fake news about abortion. Like there's a lot of stories about abortion after birth, which is, not a reality. And so like, how do you recommend that we approach misinformation?
Well, the first thing is, developing that trusting relationship. And if somebody shares something, I think doing exactly the same things I talked about, oh, wow, that must be really upsetting to you to think that that's happening. Like, I think reflecting back some of what they're sharing and what they're feeling, like, wow, if I thought that that was happening, I would be really upset too. And so I think we can validate people in that way and make a connection with them without validating the information that they're sharing. And once you've done that, somebody might be more open to hearing you say, I pay a lot of attention to a lot of sources, and I've even looked for that information, and I'm not finding that that's happening based on the sources that I'm looking at. If there are sources you'd like to share with me, feel free to do that, and I'll look into those. So I think maybe even making it collaborative, like, okay, let's get to the bottom of this together.
Bev and I were in a taxi together in Michigan, so in a swing state just before the election. And the taxi driver asked us, who should I vote for? And Bev said, well, tell me what you're thinking. What are you thinking?
What are the issues that you're caught up on?
And the two things that he said were, he said, immigration, a quarter of immigrants are rapists or murderers. And then the other thing that he shared was,
he was really upset about women's sports and trans athletes.
Yeah. And well, Bev's response to that was very good. I don't think we'll put it on the podcast. Bev asked him when he had given a shit about women's sports in any other context, like if he had ever given a shit about women's sports in any other time.
I didn't ask about him specifically. I was like, when have Americans really started caring about women's sports?
But it was this time when, I think both of us sort of tried to use some of the skills that you're describing to have this conversation. And I don't know that we were, it takes practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was willing to talk to us, like we were, I felt like we were asking questions and trying to gain understanding of what his life was like and kind of, yeah.
Oh, it sounds like you were doing really good work there, and and being really open to that conversation. Because if somebody led with those two things, you might be like, I don't know, it sounds like I already know who you're going to vote for, but maybe not. Like maybe someone's like, I'm hearing all of this stuff, but I'm still not sure. And I think that's actually an interesting question. It's like, oh, what makes you not sure about who you want to vote for? Like, what are, where are people uncertain? Where are people thinking about things that aren't completely aligned, maybe with all the media and social media that they're paying attention to? And that's the other piece of all of this, because we're talking about, having dialogue and how to have effective dialogue. But it turns out I wrote this book all about how to have dialogue very specifically. There's examples, there's like all the skills. And then some people said, oh, this is so helpful. It's exactly what I need. And then there are all the people who said to me, oh, it's so nice that you wrote this book about how to have dialogue, but I don't want to talk to those people. And I'm still kind of losing it. So what do you got for me? And that's what I'm hearing from so many people these days is the stress and distress that they're feeling, that they don't even have to have a conversation with another person. They can be sitting alone in their home, just stressing out so much. Maybe they're listening to the radio or scrolling. Doom scrolling is real. So I will say all of that puts people in a terrible position when they actually have opportunity for dialogue. So, or even if they don't have opportunity for dialogue, it's just not good for us. Like, your doctors, like, this is not healthy for us to be at this level of emotional activation constantly.
I feel like in popular culture, people often are talking about the dread that they feel before Thanksgiving. And it was something we talked about sort of when we were starting the podcast in terms of when we were going to release it, about helping people have these conversations at the Thanksgiving table, because you encounter a wider array of your family and friends. One thing that is your advantage in that circumstance is that you probably already have an alliance with the person who's across the table from you, right? You're at the same Thanksgiving meal. So you're in the same family or friend set. And so there's some affection, love, trust that is there that gives you something at least to start with, right? In terms of, as opposed to having to build a relationship from scratch with a stranger. But it doesn't, I don't know, but the fact that there is that, right? It's like almost a cliche now that people have this dread about their Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
I almost think it's harder though, right? Because it's, these are people that there's a lot on it's not just like a stranger you're having this conversation with. There's a lot more on the line if you screw it up, right? Or if they have a very visceral reaction to bringing up abortion over the mashed potatoes. Like I feel like there's so much more, there's a lot to lose. And so you have to prepare for that differently, I think.
Absolutely. And it's both of those things. It's like, oh, you've got a history with these people, so you have a connection. It's like, oh, you have a history with these people. Like that's not always the best thing in the world. And you also have a future with them. And so it's more consequential. One of the things about the Thanksgiving table is that it's not a one-on-one conversation. And I think that's one of the challenges with doing something in that environment. I always suggest that if people are going to do dialogue, that they do it one-on-one, because then you're not doing it with an audience there. And people, let's apply psychology. People behave differently when there's an audience. And, people often talk about debate as a model for what we should be doing in these conversations. And the thing about debate is that we never think that the other team is going to hear our arguments and go, oh, I never thought about things that way. And they're going to come over to our side of the podium and be on our team. That's not an expectation we have, because in debate, you are not trying to convince the other team. You're trying to convince an outside observer, a judge or the audience or the voters, or the other people at the Thanksgiving table. And so debate is actually, so that everyone wants to look smart and logical and well-informed and have all of their arguments there ready to lay out. And none of that is what I said to do when you're having
And you want to
dialogue.
win. You want to win when you're having a debate. At least I want to win.
No question. No question. You absolutely want to win. And the funny thing is that winning is not consistent with any of those goals that people have for dialogue, except that you're absolutely right that people do want to win. This is the most important thing I learned when I was working on this book about dialogue, is that people have more than one want. Yes, they want to maintain that connection, but they want to win. Yes, they want to convince someone, but they want their view to feel validated. So we have these clear motivations for why we would want to do it. And then there are all these other motivations that get in the way of that too.
And so how do you approach that specifically with someone, like someone you care about? Let's say it's my Uncle Bob, right? What's your advice about how to handle those interactions? Like if you are in a group at Thanksgiving, maybe it's not the best opportunity to foster a dialogue, and you want to, one of my motivations is maintaining that relationship. One of my motivations is talking with this person because I think that, to understand how their views are consistent with their values, perhaps.
Yeah, you would actually like to change their mind, I suspect, right? Okay, yeah. And you're like, hey, I have an opportunity here because here's somebody I'm connected to who sees things differently. And so the first thing to do is to have that communication one-on-one. And at Thanksgiving is a great opportunity because you can reach out to someone before Thanksgiving and say, hey, I know Thanksgiving is coming up, and sometimes things get a little weird at the table about people's different views. And so I don't want to talk about this there, but I'd actually be really interested in having a conversation with you about this topic, about abortion, because I know that we see things differently. And I really want to know more about where you're coming from. And I wonder if you would be willing to take some time to talk with me, either on the phone or maybe at Thanksgiving, we can take a walk together. So it's a great opportunity to sort of reach out to somebody and set up a way to do that one-on-one conversation. We talk a lot about polarization these days and how polarization's gotten so much worse. And it turns out that our actual views on the issues have gotten a little bit more consolidated on each side and a little bit farther apart, but not that much. What's actually really ramped up in the past few years is not ideological polarization, that difference in views, but is what we call affective polarization, which is the mistrust and distancing that we feel with people on the other side of the political spectrum. And so at this point, people don't want to work with or live near or have a family member marry somebody who's in a different political party. And that humanization or dehumanization, we actually think that they dehumanize and hate us more than they actually do. We think that our views are farther apart than they actually are. We think that they are more extreme uninformed and illogical and hateful than they actually are. So there's a lot of skewed perceptions that we have of people on the other side. And I'm not saying that like no one is misinformed, illogical, and extreme. Like we can all come up with examples of that. And it's exactly what we see in the media, because that's what the media gives us, and it's what we gobble up. We gobble up the media that tells us that the other side, is monstrous, and we are right about everything. Like we all love to listen to that media. So it's important for us to recognize that the other side is much more diverse than we imagine them to be, and that most people on any issue, most people are in the middle.
I mean, one of the things that motivated us to do this podcast is that we do a lot of interviews with journalists, and often we would have this like very in-depth discussion with them, very nuanced discussion about what we were seeing. And then they would pick like one like spicy soundbite that they would put in the article. And it's like totally disregarding the whole larger, more nuanced story of what we were seeing. And so we wanted to have that longer conversation because we see journalists on both sides taking the spicy comments and really amplifying those or making it out into something that's not really the reality of the day-to-day, which is not to dismiss that people's realities are very difficult and challenging right now, but it's, it's a more complicated conversation.
Absolutely. I have had very similar experiences. And, it's the journalists' choices, it's their editors' choices, but even more so, it's the consumers' choices. Like it's what they are dishing out, and it's what we are gobbling up, and it's like, give me seconds. It's like we want more. We just click, 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 click on it.
Can I ask you to go back and define cognitive bias? I have my producer in our head being like, oh, you got to make her define that term.
Absolutely. So cognitive biases, I think about them as flaws in our operating system. So as humans, we have ways of misperceiving the world, ourselves, and other people that are built in, and they're built in for various reasons from how we evolved, and they sort of made sense in some context. But some of the cognitive biases that are most influential in the spheres we're talking about right now are confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is the one where we are drawn to information that confirms what we already believe to be true, and we ignore or dismiss information that conflicts with our existing beliefs. And so that's where we end up thinking, oh, I'm right and they are wrong and misinformed. There's also one called naive realism. In naive realism, we think that we are objective and they are biased, and we all think that. And then I had talked before about motive attribution asymmetry, where we think that we are motivated by good and love, and they are motivated by hatred and violence. And so taken together, it's pretty easy to see if you just reflect on a thought that you're having about people on the other side and notice when it fits into any of those cognitive biases. When that happens for me, I go, oh, I wonder if there's another way of understanding this. So if it's something where I'm like, whoa, they're talking about some information I've never heard before, like that doesn't sound right. I go to the website allsides.com and I'm like, how is this issue being covered by different news sources? Both because maybe there's some news, maybe there's some information that I've missed, or, oh, yeah, I don't think that's quite right, but I can see where people are really being fed that information. What I've been noticing is that a lot of the problem is not misinformation or disinformation per se. Like that's not as widespread as we think it is. I mean, where it exists, it causes huge problems. But what's really happening a lot of the time is that we're being exposed to small slices of information that are different from the small slices the other side's being exposed to. So anyway, that's how some of this comes into play, but how I try to use my understanding of cognitive bias to correct for that bias. If I'm like, oh, they're being hateful because because of this law that they're passing. I'm like, okay, is that how everyone who supports the law is seeing their own motivation? Or is there some other way that they're seeing it? Oh, parents want to know about what's going on with their kids in school. And so, oh, that's why they're supporting this. So if I go at them and say, hey, you hate gay people, don't do that, then they're like, I don't hate gay people. We're losing them. We're missing an opportunity here. So where we notice our views are consistent with those biases and we can correct for them, we can be much more effective.
I'm curious, what other things right now are giving you hope in this moment?
I know. It's like, what is there to be hopeful about? So I'm going to tell you the thing that makes me most hopeful is there's this thing called the bridging movement. There are over 500 organizations in the U.S. working on bridging divides and strengthening our democracy. And you are probably not hearing much about them in the news because, again, the news is like focused on controversy. So the best thing, I'm just going to tell all the listeners, the best thing that you can do is go to the Listen First Project website and sign their Listen First pledge, because then you will get a weekly email on Listen First Friday that's going to tell you something about these organizations and what they're doing. And that is what gives me the most hope. I'm just going to give one example because this is so great. There's this organization called Raft for America. They are taking Republicans and Democrats whitewater rafting together. Which sounds like it could be very dangerous. But it turns out if you actually put real human beings together in a situation where they have to cooperate, then it humanizes them to each other. And that's one of the important things for us to do. So people are being very creative in terms of what they're doing, but this gives me so much hope. So if there's one thing that I could have every person in this country do, it would be to volunteer in their community. Doesn't have to be political, but anything where they are engaging with other people in the place where they live. And engaging in the community, that's, I think, one of the things that's going to be most helpful. It's not only going to be good for us to be able to do and for us in relationship with other people, but it actually strengthens our communities and it's going to help to hold our democracy together. Because the more connected we are, the harder it is to bring down this system.
Okay, so I feel like I learned a lot from Dr. Israel, and there are definitely some take-home points. We'll summarize everything on our Substack.
But it is so frustrating. What a frustrating way to have to deal with people.
Well, you obviously have some work to do to transcend this anger. Yeah. But I think, it is frustrating because we're medical experts. And sometimes people just want to debate us without really having a conversation. So that part is frustrating. But I do think when people actually come into genuine conversation with curiosity, that's much more fulfilling, right? So if they're following her guidelines and we're following her guidelines, we can transcend the anger. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's hard. I was being a little facetious, right? I think it's hard, but I think it's worth it. And one of the things she points out is that when you have conversations where you're having true dialogue, you're both moving a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that just one person moves.
Right. Well, you have a good example.
I do. I had
from last Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I had an Uncle Bob moment at last Thanksgiving. We had just released a couple of the first episodes of the podcast, and an uncle who I love approached me and said, hey, I really enjoy the podcast, but I wanted to bring up this one issue with you. You mentioned that all abortions are medically indicated, and I just don't agree with that. If someone just wants to end their pregnancy because they don't want the baby, I don't understand how that's medically indicated. And we were in a public setting, so we weren't one-on-one. And the thing I did well was I listened and said, tell me more about that, or let me understand what you're saying. And I said, I'll have to think about that. I wasn't prepared fully for the conversation. I didn't follow up, and we didn't have a conversation in a private setting. We weren't prepared. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't perfect. Interestingly, when I reached out to ask if I could tell this anecdote on the podcast, my uncle said, well, sure, you can say that, but I want to have a follow-up conversation. I want us to have a one-on-one.
So you planned ahead for this Thanksgiving. Yep. So I think if we were to grade you on this experience, maybe a B-. Like
yep.
You practice some of the principles, but you have some work to do.
And he gets,
we're going to give him an A.
High A plus.
Yeah. But we'll follow up and maybe you can kind of resubmit your homework.
Okay.
Opinions expressed on this podcast are our own. Philanthropy keeps this podcast ad-free, and to donate, you can find a link in the show notes.
Keep in mind that donation is tax-deductible.
Tax-deductible.
This podcast is executive produced by us, Dr. Beverly Gray and Dr. Jonas Swartz, and Jane Marie. Production by Little Everywhere. Thanks to Nick Thorburn, Patrick Ford, and Maker for our score. Extra special thanks to everyone who lent their knowledge and voices to the show.
And we hope you'll take Dr. Israel's advice and find a volunteer opportunity in your own community.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.